Let me go to Omer. We have heard in the previous panel that Turkey, or let me be correct, Turkey is fast becoming one of the most important actors in the Syrian conversation. How do you respond to that? Does Turkey see itself as one? And where do you think lies the possibility of Turkey actually being a champion of elevating establishment of safe environment in Syria to the top of the political agenda?
I can answer once again.
Sure, sure.
So first of all, thanks for this invitation by the European Institute of Peace and SACD. I am really honored to be here with you. And when it comes to the perspective of Turkey, let me first say one thing and then go on. I cannot imagine a future of Turkey without Syria and Syrians, and I cannot imagine a future for Syria without Turkey. I mean, just looking at this from a demographic perspective, the number of Syrians living inside Turkey and in the Turkish protected areas inside Syria are approximately the same, to some degrees even more, than the number of Syrians living in regime-held Syria. So this has to show something. And Turkey is going to be an important part of Syria, and Syria is going to be an important part of Turkey. So, and let me comment on one small detail of Mohammed Ala being so diplomatic, but I am less diplomatic. We know that in the United States of America, there are in the National Security Council forces who not put a blunt eye on the Arab normalization attempts with Assad regime, but actually advocate for them. So we have to underline this, that there is a force who wants the normalization of the Assad regime, and this emancipates from the perspective of preserving the gains and the relationship the United States of America made with the YPG-dominated Syrian Democratic Force. So this is a niche approach, which is in its doctrine military and which is in its doctrine embedded in preserving the personal career gains of some certain people. Anyway, let's come back to Turkey. I do believe that when we look at Turkey's perspective on Syria, there is this discrepancy between north of Turkey and south of Turkey. When Turkey looks to its north, there is a huge war ongoing in Ukraine, and the European Union is investing millions of money, the United States, and we are all supporting Ukraine against Russian invasion, and even huge amounts of weapons and supplies have been sent to Ukraine, and Turkey is also an important part of this process. But when Turkey looks to the south, the situation is completely different. We don't have a Russian-American war or competition, but Turkey sees a Russian-American cooperation that is blocking Turkey from conducting new military operations in northern Syria. And this impasse is being preserved for the last 5 years. The last Turkish military operation was in 2019. And since then, the Russian military is on the ground protecting the US-supported YPG, the dominated Syrian Democratic Forces. And the US maintains a sanctions threat against Turkey if Turkey launches a military operation. So this Russian-American cooperation has established a balance of power in Syria in which no one can move. And in 2020, Turkey showed that Turkey will not allow that a military solution will be forced upon the Syrian people, and that Turkey is willing to risk the lives of its own soldiers to maintain the political solution in Syria and to prevent a migration wave towards Turkey in the region of Idlib in 2020. So in this balance of power, Turkey is now in a searching mode. How can we find a gap? How can we find an alternative? And as a result of this approach, we have seen that Turkey actually approached Damascus and tried to speak with Damascus and to find a common ground, but it failed miserably. I mean, the Assad regime was quite clear in demonstrating that it's not willing to make any concessions or not willing to cooperate. And I think the Turkish attitude, and there is in Turkey a strong force from the Turkish opposition, in particular, that advocates to speaking with Damascus, as they have a misunderstanding of what the Assad regime is and what its priorities are. The many Turkish security experts believe that Assad's primary interest is preserving Syria's territorial integrity, which is not. Its primary interest is preserving the regime's presence. So it wants to survive. And secondly, they think that some of the Turkish experts think that Damascus and Ankara can work together. But the issue is, from the perspective of Damascus, Ankara is a threat, not a potential partner. So therefore, these talks failed. And now Turkey is in a situation in which it sees that the United States of America could potentially withdraw from Syria, and that this could open a new avenue, a window of opportunity to do something new in Syria. And what I, my person as an expert, have foreseen this, and I am advocating since almost 3 years now that the United States of America and Turkey have to work together in Syria. And here, let me also put in the domestic aspect of Turkey's approach to Syria into this big picture. After the refugee deal with the European Union, the Turkish society sentiments changed in regards to Syrian refugees. Up until then, it was quite good, and the Turks were quite polite, and they were welcoming the Syrians. But then it changed because the refugee deal gave the Turks the impression, and let me put this into the words of a liberal, I mean, he is a liberal, Turkish journalist who's very famous, is how did Turkey become the refugee dump of Europe? So this is the perception in the Turkish society. And this unjust, and I don't agree with this assessment, but this perception is forcing Turkey to first prevent new migrations and to find avenues to facilitate the return of refugees back to Syria. And here, I believe I can connect with your question to the safe environment. The official numbers in Turkey are decreasing. 2 years ago, we had 3.7 million Syrian refugees registered in Turkey. Now we have 3.1 million, and it's decreasing every day almost. And the reason for this decrease are two. The first is the Syrian refugees who went to Europe were never delisted from the Turkish register. So it took time to find out that they went to Europe because the Syrian refugees did not tell the Turkish authorities, I'm going to Europe, bye-bye. So therefore, they had to be delisted. And 1 million is not a small number for the official record. A second reason for the decrease in numbers is that some Syrians went elsewhere, like Egypt, etc., but this is very minor. The main issue is return to Syria. And we know that not from the official numbers of the Turkish government, but from the numbers of the border gates in Syria, that over the last 1.5 years, more than 100,000 Syrian refugees returned back to Syria. So all of them are legally under voluntary return, but reality is a different one, as we all know. So, and Turkey wants to facilitate this process of return, and Turkey wants to enable as much return as possible. Turkey isn't believing that all of the refugees will return, but to reduce the burden on the Turkish society, because the Turkish sentiment is going to the worst. So here, the Turks are quite pragmatic. They don't think according to lines of safe environment. They think according to lines of housing, infrastructure, economy, and basic needs. So this is the Turkish approach. So housing, we see that there's an immense effort by the Turkish authorities in collaboration with Arab states and Arab NGOs to establish new housing projects. And we see that there is a huge construction project ongoing in northwest Syria. And we see that Turkey has provided electricity, water to these regions, which is much better than the electricity and water supply in Damascus. However, there are some limitations, one of which is territory. This area had a pre-war population of 1.5 million. Now it's already 5.5 million. And with more refugees returned back to this area, it has a limit. Therefore, Turkey tried to speak with Damascus, but it failed miserably. The Damascus and Assad regime is not interested in accepting. And I think if safe environment, this topic, could be articulated to Turkish decision makers as an avenue for Syrian refugee return, they would be interested to listen. But if we articulate safe environment as an issue that is an obstacle in front of refugee return, they won't listen to this concept. So it is important to acknowledge that the Turkish society, unfortunately, has a need for a lower number of Syrian refugees that could be integrated in the future. But at the moment, the main focus of the Turkish policy makers is how much can we get back to Syria?
Let me just ask you one follow-up question before I go to Ivan. And that is the area of influence in northwest Syria. Like you just described, there isn't really an approach that would prioritize safe environment. There are problems there as well when it comes to safety, security. Our research from the association consistently shows that. How can we communicate that to the decision makers in Turkey, that this is an issue, that the return, sustainable return, especially if we are talking about people who are not from there, like you said, the original population is far smaller than what is it currently. Security and safety is absolutely a priority for them. How can we put that on the table?
So, first of all, I understand the argument that these people are not from these places, so they should not return to these places. I 100% understand this argument. But looking from Ankara, it doesn't make sense. For Ankara, what is the difference of a Syrian living in Gaziantep, Istanbul, Hatay, or living in Elbab, Idlib? What's the difference? They are both not at home. So from the Turkish perspective, this argument of they should return back to the areas they are originally from doesn't make much sense. And what I can say is how this argument of safe environment can be articulated to Turkish officials is that to put this into a perspective with numbers and to put this into a perspective with the Turkish mentality, we have to understand that the Turkish mentality is more focused on things you can touch rather than concepts. So how can safe environment be included into projects, into an approach that is touchable? How can this be connected? How can the security issues in this region, which need to be resolved, which need to become better for the return of refugees, be connected to the safe environment concept? How can we maybe, and I'm not sure, and you have spoken about this, how can safe environment be a village? If you understand what I mean. How can safe environment be a housing complex? Because this is the way the Turks think. They don't think in abstract concepts, they think in concrete, touchable things.